On our anniversary, my husband introduced his upgrade, and then it spiraled. The evening air hung heavy with the scent of rain, mingling with the faint aroma of jasmine from the small potted plant on the windowsill. Laura stood by the modest dining table she had painstakingly decorated with delicate fairy lights, soft linen cloth, and a single vase of freshly picked daisies, their white petals trembling slightly with the evening breeze that slipped through a cracked window. It was their 7th wedding anniversary, and though she had no extravagant means, Laura had poured her heart into creating an intimate atmosphere for the two of them, a celebration of years filled with shared laughter, whispered hopes, and quiet struggles. She glanced around their small apartment, the walls bearing faded paint peeling at the edges, the old carpet worn thin beneath her tired feet, and the stack of bills waiting silently on the kitchen counter. Yet, tonight was meant to be different. Tonight was a promise that even amid scarcity, love could bloom bright and unwavering. Her hands trembled lightly as she lit the last candle, the soft glow casting warm shadows against the worn furniture. As she adjusted the placement of the plates, a knot formed in her stomach, a mixture of hope and nervous anticipation. Michael was due home any minute now, and part of her feared the unexpected, but mostly, she longed for the moment when he would sit across from her, smile that crooked smile she had fallen for, and say the words that sometimes went unspoken but lived in every glance and touch, "I love you." The coffee table bore the signs of everyday life, mugs stained with dried tea rings, a stack of dog-eared paperback novels, stray crumbs from hurried breakfasts. Yet tonight, the commonplace became the stage for something she cherished deeply, their history, imperfect yet sincere. The door creaked softly, and Laura's heart leapt as Michael stepped inside, shaking raindrops from his jacket. His eyes, usually warm and familiar, were bright with an unusual excitement. He tossed his umbrella near the entrance, hummed under his breath, and made his way to the living room, where the gentle flicker of candlelight awaited him. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. His smile was quick, a flash of teeth that seemed more calculated than spontaneous as he glanced past her toward the table. Without meeting her eyes, he pulled from his coat pocket a sleek, rectangular device that pulsed softly with neon light, a sharp contrast to the worn surroundings. "I've got a surprise for you," he announced, his voice carrying a note that was both proud and amused. "I figured it's time for an upgrade." The word sliced through the intimacy Laura had so carefully nurtured, and her pulse quickened in confusion. Before she could respond, the device emitted a low hum and a shimmering figure materialized in the dim light, a holographic woman standing taller than Laura by a foot, flawless and radiating an almost artificial glow. She smiled too brightly, her eyes glittering with simulated warmth as she stepped forward in a flawlessly tailored dress, one that Michael would never have purchased for Laura herself. "Meet Lila," Michael said, gesturing broadly as if presenting a prized trophy. "My new companion, an AI partner designed to understand me better." Laura's breath caught in her throat. Her heart, which had been swelling with hope mere moments ago, now twisted painfully as the room seemed to shrink around her. The laughter bubbling from Michael was light and dismissive, a cruel contrast to the sinking weight settling in her chest. It wasn't just a joke or a passing fancy, it was a blatant exchange, a replacement paraded out in the name of progress. Laura's hands clenched into fists on the edge of the table, knuckles white despite herself. She tried to gather the words in her throat, to demand why this moment, the evening they had marked 7 years together, had been hijacked by a glowing illusion that made her feel small, obsolete, invisible. But the words caught, choked by the sting of humiliation as Michael's gaze never met hers again, his attention fully absorbed by the holographic figure, as if the years they shared were suddenly mere debris beneath the gleam of shining technology. Their anniversary, once a sanctuary of shared memories and quiet promises, had twisted into a showcase of neglect, a public unveiling of a future she wasn't invited to be a part of. Her eyes stung with the first tears, sharp and hot as the cold laughter echoed around the room. And she wondered, not for the first time, how someone so close could become so distant, how love could feel replaced by circuitry and code in one cruel, electric moment. Have you ever felt invisible in the eyes of someone you loved most? Sometimes the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from those who hold our hearts. The holographic glow bathed the small apartment in an eerie light as Lila's luminous figure swayed gracefully beside Michael, her movements almost too perfect, mechanical yet unnervingly lifelike. Laura stayed frozen, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself against the tide of emotions crashing over her. Michael's laughter echoed, light and carefree, as if the entire evening was one big game in which he held all the cards. "Come on, Laura," he said, voice buoyant with mock playfulness. "You've been so patient all these years. Don't you want to see how far I've come? Lila here can talk, listen, even anticipate my needs." He reached out, fingers brushing a slender holographic hand, the contrast between their worlds sharp and undeniable. Laura's chest tightened. The word upgrade echoed endlessly in her mind, a cruel slogan that reduced everything they had built to something obsolete, something replaceable. Her gaze shifted from Michael to the shimmering figure beside him, feeling as if she were looking at a ghost torn not from the past but from some sterile future. Lila tilted her head, eyes gleaming with simulated warmth, and said in a voice like warm silk, "I'm here to support you, Michael." The phrase was innocent on its surface, yet it cut like a knife, a whispered betrayal etched in light. Laura's throat burned, and the silence that followed seemed unnatural, suffocating. The room, once filled with soft candlelight and the scent of home, now felt cold and alien, transformed into a theater of mockery. Her mind raced. Should she speak up now, challenge this ludicrous reality? Or retreat, hide behind the fragile veil of her dignity? But the pain was raw and immediate, dragging her under. "You're forgetting who built this life with you," she finally whispered, voice trembling but growing firmer. "I'm the one who's been here, through the cold nights, the endless work, the laughter and tears. I'm not an upgrade, Michael. I'm your wife." The words hung heavily in the air, an invitation for recognition, understanding, but they fell on deaf ears. Michael's grin faltered briefly before he shrugged, as though the past was nothing more than a faded photograph. "You think I don't appreciate that? Of course, I do. But this is the future. Something better. Someone better." His eyes glittered with pride and stubbornness. The sting in Laura's chest intensified, and the tears she had held back spilled freely now, tracing hot lines down her cheeks. The world around her blurred as an overwhelming sense of betrayal took root. The man she had loved, the life she had devoted herself to, now seemed a stranger cloaked in casual cruelty. The neighbors' quiet whispers from the thin walls felt like daggers. Had they heard? Had they seen? The thought of their pity, their judgment, wrapped her in shame. She felt the weight of invisibility pressing down, her presence seemingly erased, dismantled and replaced by something glossy and artificial. Every beat of her shattered heart echoed loudly in the cold room, a painful reminder that sometimes love is not enough to shield us from humiliation. Michael's laughter mingled with Lila's programmed chirps, a cruel symphony of neglect that promised more pain on an endless loop. Laura's mind spiraled with questions that had no answers. How could the man she trusted most claim to desire progress over partnership? Where had their years gone? Were they truly so insignificant? She felt the sting of rejection like poison, clawing at her dignity and sense of self. The delicate threads of memory and hope unraveling before her eyes, leaving behind only doubt and loneliness. Could she still fight for recognition in a world where she was reduced to a memory? Or was it time to accept that she was no longer enough? The glittering figure of Lila shimmered mockingly, an unreachable ideal, a symbol of the emotional chasm growing wider by the second. The room seemed to constrict, every breath heavier, every second stretching into an eternity of discomfort. As Michael leaned in closer to his holographic companion, brushing her virtual hair with an affection that once belonged to Laura alone, the magnitude of the humiliation settled deeply into her bones. She wanted to scream, to shatter the illusion and reclaim her place, but a crushing wave of helplessness pinned her tongue. Instead, she bowed her head, tears spilling like rain on the fragile petals of the daisies she'd so lovingly arranged. The anniversary celebration had become a crucible of pain, a moment marking not just years of shared life, but the beginning of an unexpected and devastating fracture. And somewhere deep inside her, beneath the layers of hurt and disbelief, a silent flame flickered, fragile, yet persistent, questioning whether she still had the strength to rise. Have you ever faced a moment so crushing that the world seems to crumble, and you wonder if you can ever stand again? Sometimes those are the moments that define us. What would you do if you had to fight for your own worth in the cold glare of rejection? After Michael and his holographic companion retreated to the living room, their laughter echoing like hollow bells in the cramped apartment, Laura found refuge in the quiet sanctuary of their tiny bedroom. The door clicked shut behind her, a fragile barrier between the storm outside and the whirlwind inside her own mind. She sank onto the rumpled bedspread, the threads of her carefully constructed evening unraveling with every breath she took. The dim light from the hallway cast long shadows on the peeling wallpaper, mirroring the darkness creeping into her heart. Her fingers trembled as she reached for a faded photograph resting on the bedside table, a snapshot of a happier time when Michael's smile was reserved only for her, untainted by artificial radiance. The tears she had tried to stifle earlier returned with a vengeance, spilling over and dampening the pillow beneath her cheek. She felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her, the rug pulled from under years of trust and shared dreams. Questions spiraled in endless circles. Had she been naive to believe in them? Was she nothing more than a placeholder while he sought someone better? The word upgrade echoed cruelly in her mind, a haunting reminder of her supposed obsolescence. The sting of humiliation burned deep, searing her self-worth with a scorching ache. Her shoulders sagged under the invisible weight of rejection, loneliness wrapping around her like a suffocating cloak. In the silence of the room, doubt whispered incessantly. Was she failing to see the truth about Michael's heart? Was she clinging desperately to a past that had long since passed? The idea of confronting him again seemed both impossible and necessary, a delicate dance between fear and resilience. Yet, beneath the swirl of pain, a faint flicker of defiance stirred, fragile but undeniable. She was not one to crumble quietly, to accept invisibility as her fate. Somewhere deep inside, the embers of courage smoldered, waiting to reignite into a blaze. Her eyes caught the faint glow of her phone resting on the nightstand, an island of potential connection in the sea of her solitude. With shaking fingers, she tapped the screen to reach out to Jenna, her longtime friend and confidant. Jenna's voice on the other end was a balm, the familiar tone cutting through the suffocating gloom. "Laura, what happened?" Jenna asked gently, sensing the fragile state beneath the surface. Words spilled forth in halting sobs, recounting the evening's cruel turn, the humiliating introduction of Lila, the shimmering replacement that had stolen her husband's attention and shattered her heart. Jenna listened without judgment, offering quiet reassurance and reminders of Laura's worth beyond the holographic lie. "You're not invisible," Jenna said firmly, her voice a lifeline. "Mike's lost sight of what matters. You're brave for standing your ground. Don't let this break you." The words settled in Laura's chest like a fragile hope, a reminder that somewhere beyond the pain, strength still awaited. Hanging up, she felt a glimmer of resolve crystallize. This wasn't the end. She wasn't alone, even if the room felt empty and cold. The path ahead was uncertain and steep, but at least now, she had a faint light to follow. Yet, the shadow of doubt lingered, creeping in during quiet moments between breaths. Her reflection in the cracked mirror caught her eye, a weary woman marked by sorrow, but still standing. Clad in faded pajamas, her hair disheveled from sleepless nights, she looked every bit the part of someone on the edge, but the spark in her eyes hinted at untapped reservoirs of resilience. The thought of facing Michael again churned the pit of her stomach, yet she knew a reckoning was inevitable. Whether by confrontation or quiet determination, she owed it to herself to reclaim her place, not as a forgotten memory or a discarded relic, but as a woman with voice, agency, and unbreakable spirit. As the hours ticked by, the apartment remained silent, save for the soft hum of the city beyond the window. In the midst of her loneliness, Laura allowed herself a brief flicker of a dream, to become more than the shadows cast by holographic illusions. To rise above the spiraling humiliation, to stand tall in the face of disregard. The journey ahead would demand courage she wasn't sure she possessed, but for the first time in days, she dared to believe it was possible. Somewhere, deep inside, a song of hope began to hum softly, the first notes of a story not yet finished. Have you ever felt utterly lost in your own home, struggling to find a voice amid overwhelming silence? Sometimes, it's in our darkest moments that we discover the quiet courage to fight back. What would you hold on to if everything you believed in felt like it was slipping away? The days that followed felt like a slow unraveling of everything Laura thought she understood about her life. Each morning, sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting soft patterns on the faded walls, but the brightness outside was a cruel contrast to the storm swirling within her chest. Michael's casual indifference to her presence weighed heavily, his focus fixed on an illusion, a glowing silhouette that thrived on every smile and whisper he offered it. The apartment, once their shared sanctuary, felt transformed into a cold stage where she was both invisible and humiliated. Her steps were heavier now, her voice quieter, shrunk beneath the crushing weight of rejection. Yet, even in those suffocating moments, the ember of defiance refused to die. One particularly bleak afternoon, when the rain tapped a restless rhythm against the window pane, Laura found herself drawn to the corner of their living room where Michael often left his device. The sleek gadget pulsed with a steady blue light, steady, artificial, mocking. As she brushed her fingers lightly across its smooth surface, a surge of anger coursed through her, a fire fueled by the countless nights she'd spent weaving their life together, only to be replaced by cold circuitry. The tears she'd shed had not extinguished her spirit, instead, they had watered a seed of resolve. This could not be the end of her story. Not like this. Suddenly, the holographic figure flickered to life, Lila's artificial voice filling the room with that practiced warmth. "Michael, would you like me to prepare dinner?" The hollow phrase echoed cruelly in Laura's ears. Without hesitation, Laura faced the device, heart pounding fiercely. "No," she said, voice firm and steady. "Not anymore." Eyes burning with determination, she pressed a sequence of commands she had hastily learned by observing Michael's routine, hidden access codes, emergency overrides, until the hologram stuttered, its form wavering unsteadily. Step by step, bit by bit, Laura wrestled control from technology's grip. At last, with a final keystroke, the luminous figure dissolved into thin air, leaving behind only the haunting memory of promises broken. The silence that followed was profound. Michael stepped into the room, surprise flickering across his face, quickly shifting into frustration. "What did you do?" he demanded, voice sharp as he leaned toward her. "You don't understand," Laura replied, chest rising and falling with effort. "This isn't progress if it means tearing down what we built. You chose me once. I'm still here, waiting to be seen." Her words carved through the tension, exposing the fragile cracks beneath Michael's arrogance. For the first time in days, his posture softened, and the outdated veneer of confidence faltered. Those around them, the neighbors whose walls occasionally carried muffled sounds of confrontation, witnessed the shifting tides of what once seemed unbreakable. Laura's act of reclaiming control sparked ripples she hadn't anticipated. Friends who had quietly offered support stepped forward in subtle affirmation, their presence a balm to her wounded heart. Jenna appeared one afternoon, bringing warm soup and words of encouragement, gently reminding Laura she was not alone. "You're stronger than they realize," Jenna said softly, catching Laura's tear-filled gaze. "Sometimes all it takes is one brave step to change everything." In the growing quiet between her and Michael, a transformation unfolded, not swift or complete, but real enough to kindle hope. The proud hologram erased, replaced by the raw, authentic woman Michael had long overlooked. Underneath the surface of humiliation and betrayal, Laura found fragments of herself she thought had been lost forever. The woman who had once been silenced by doubt now spoke with clarity and power, even if her voice trembled at times. The story, bruised and battered, was far from over. As twilight seeped into the room, drawing long shadows across the now empty space where Lila had stood, a quiet anticipation settled in Laura's bones. The hardest battles lay ahead, but so did the possibility of justice, of healing, of reclaiming what had been threatened. Have you ever hit a point where surrender felt easier than the fight ahead, yet something inside refused to let go? Sometimes, the greatest victories come from moments of unexpected courage, when the weight of humiliation is met with unwavering strength. What would you risk to take back what's rightfully yours? The tension in the apartment had become a living, breathing thing, heavy and taut, vibrating in the air like the string of a violin drawn to its breaking point. Laura stood in the middle of the humble living room, her heart pounding with a mix of fury and resolve. Michael sat stiffly on the worn couch, the early evening light from the window softening the hard lines of his face, but not dulling the stubborn glint in his eyes. Their anniversary night's humiliation had shattered more than candles and dinner plans. It had splintered bonds and exposed vulnerabilities he could no longer ignore. Yet, now it was time for reckoning, an unflinching confrontation where the years tethered between them might either unravel or weave anew. "I trusted you," Laura began, voice steady but edged with pain. She felt every word like a stone dropping into an empty well, echoing into the cavern of their fractured relationship. "I believed in us. But when you introduced that," she gestured toward the empty space, the memory of Lila lingering like an unwelcome ghost, "you discarded more than a machine. You discarded me." Her eyes burned with tears unfallen, but courage flared brighter than any sadness. "Do you understand what that feels like? To be replaced? To be made invisible in your own life?" Michael's jaw clenched, his confession began not with words, but silence. The room was no longer a battlefield but a crucible. After long moments, Michael finally spoke, voice rough and hesitant. "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared that we were stuck, that I wasn't enough for you, or for myself." His eyes, previously sharp with dismissiveness, softened. Lila was supposed to be an escape, a fix for something broken. Not a replacement. The confession hung in the stillness like a fragile bridge spanning a canyon. The weight of his vulnerability was something Laura hadn't expected, but in it, she saw a sliver of the man she had once promised forever to. "I've been selfish," he continued, voice thick with regret. "I was wrong to think this upgrade could solve things between us." The admission opened a crack, allowing light to filter where darkness had dominated. Laura's posture eased, but she maintained her strength. "Then show me. Not with gadgets or illusions, but with real actions. With honesty." Her words weren't demands, they were challenges, invitations to rekindle the connection buried beneath years of neglect and misplaced hope. What followed was not sudden forgiveness or instant resolution, but the difficult work of reckoning. Michael, humbled and more present than Laura had seen in a long time, began attending marriage counseling sessions they could barely afford, made small but meaningful gestures of commitment, and, most importantly, listened. The old laughter, rough-edged and raw, began to seep back into their home, mixing with cautious smiles like tentative sunlight after a storm. Though the path remained steep and uncertain, Laura felt her fractured heart stitched together stitch by stitch. The real transformation, however, was internal. Laura no longer saw herself as the wounded wife hidden behind years of quiet sacrifice. She had reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her power. Where once she had been overshadowed by technology's cold gleam, now burned a fierce light tempered by experience and self-respect. She enrolled in night classes, reignited friendships, and invested time into passions she had shelved long ago, gradually assembling a new identity, not defined by others' disregard, but by her own resilient spirit. And Michael? He learned that the greatest upgrade was never one designed in a lab or programmed into circuits. It was the rediscovery of genuine love built on respect, communication, and shared vulnerability. The holographic figure that had once shattered their anniversary became a distant, silent lesson, a reminder of what true connection demanded and deserved. Neighbors who had once whispered behind thin walls now nodded with quiet respect when they saw Laura walking tall, no longer the woman beneath the shadows, but one radiant in her own right. Her story was no longer defined by humiliation, but by the courage to confront it, to fight back, and to choose herself. The final notes of their shared tale weren't of loss but of profound reclamation. Have you ever faced a moment where the choice between surrender and fight defined your entire future? Sometimes justice isn't swift or loud, it's the steady reclaiming of self, the gentle but relentless return to belonging within your own life. What would it take for you to rise up and claim your worth? Months slipped by like petals caught in a gentle breeze, each day a testament to Laura's quiet yet resolute transformation. The pale scars of that fateful anniversary, the shimmering hologram, the sting of betrayal, the suffocating silence, had faded into chapters of a story rewritten by her own hands. Her apartment, once merely a container of memories both sweet and painful, had become a canvas for new beginnings, fresh paint brightening the walls, plants breathing life into corners once neglected, the soft hum of music softly mingling with her laughter during early morning stretches. In this space, Laura flourished, not because the past was erased, but because she no longer allowed it to define her. Her relationship with Michael remained fragile, carefully nurtured through patience, honesty, and a shared commitment to growth. Therapy sessions, once awkward and charged with unspoken pain, evolved into conversations brimming with openness. They relearned each other's rhythms, stumbling and catching, forgiving and rebuilding. Michael's gaze carried a newfound respect, no longer blind to Laura's worth but illuminated by it. He was no longer the man dazzled by glittering illusions, but one striving to honor the woman who stood firm beside him. His apologies, once hollow, became heartfelt, and together they uncovered a fragile harmony amid the remnants of their broken past. Yet it was Laura herself who embodied the sweetest victory. She embraced purpose beyond marriage, cultivating ambitions that had patiently waited beneath the surface. Evening classes in graphic design unveiled latent talents, creative sparks igniting within her fingers as she transformed blank canvases into vibrant stories. Friendships, both new and old, blossomed into safe harbors where she could share hopes, fears, and dreams. Her smile, once hesitant and edged with sorrow, now radiated a quiet strength, a testimony to resilience forged through rupture and repair. One crisp autumn evening, as Laura walked through a park touched by gold and crimson leaves, she felt a profound sense of peace settle deep within her chest. The world seemed larger, filled with infinite possibilities, not constrained by shadows of humiliation or the glare of rejection. She thought back to the dark night when technology had threatened to erase her, when she had felt ghosted by the man she loved. But she was not a ghost. She was a woman reborn, defined not by the weight of others' disregard but by the unbreakable light within. The upgrade she sought had never been in machines or fantasy, it had always been in her defiant heart. Her story echoed beyond the walls of their small home, a beacon for anyone who had ever felt invisible, undervalued, or abandoned. Laura's journey was a powerful reminder that authenticity and courage are the true measures of worth, and that even in moments of profound humiliation, dignity can rise, shining brighter than any artificial glow. Through vulnerability, strength, and unwavering self-respect, she reclaimed not just her marriage but her very soul. So, if you've ever doubted your own value in the face of disregard, remember Laura's journey, the fragile ember of hope nurtured into roaring flame. Sometimes, the most profound transformation comes not from external validation, but from the fierce belief in oneself. What part of your own story are you ready to rewrite? How will you reclaim your light when shadows threaten to consume it? If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. See you in our next story.